Hi, I'm Lo. You're here for a sketchbook tour. I know. Hello, skippies. Here's a timestamp. Bye. Okay, so now that nice people are here, did you see what they were wearing? That's so embarrassing. Today I'm doing, you're here. Well, you get a participation prize. I'm doing a sketchbook tour of this little thing. It is a moleskine pocket-sized sketchbook that I did a 1-week sketchbook challenge in. I filled this little dude in 7 days. And it was 7 very hard days. If you want to see the process of that, my last video, I'll even link it for you, make it easy. I guess without further ado, we'll go meet and hang out with the skippies in the actual tour part. Hello, welcome to the overhead shot. This is a small moleskine sketchbook. It has 165 GSM paper, very smooth and cream colored. I'm not usually a fan of the cream color, so I usually don't use moleskines that much. I stuck like the dead carcass of a sticker sheet on the front of the sketchbook. This little corner piece here, oh my god, every time I touched the sketchbook, it like set off my fight or flight. Like, genuinely, I touched it and I was like, why is it poking me? Why is the book fighting back? First page from day one. Honestly, a very good start to this entire thing. I love the way the apple looks. I don't know what I was drinking that day, but the apple looks absolutely scrumptious. And then I went in and just added the most minuscule effort in the form of acrylic marker. Okay, day 2. This is an acrylic paint nightmare come to life. This sketchbook page is a terrible way to promote my Instagram, but I asked on Instagram for someone to give me something to draw and someone suggested a swan and I was like, bet. And then I went in without any preparation. I was like, I can paint a swan. Spoiler alert, I can't. Like, except for the fact that I was like attacked by a swan when I was a child. I don't really have much of a reference or experience with swans. And because it's acrylic paint, you can see that it sticks to itself. Okay, this was for day 2. So, you know, day 1, we did a solid 2 spreads. I think I've seen paintings where people paint with watercolor over their just regular pencil drawings. I don't know what I was expecting. I'm looking at it, I'm like, oh, this is desaturated. Yeah, because there's a thin layer of grey graphite at the bottom of it. Like, what were you expecting? This is what I call my cop-out page. So I have some really old National Geographic magazines from 30 years ago. I've had them for quite a while with the intention of making collages or using them as references. So this was me finally taking one of the magazines I've had and cutting it up. I don't know who this man is. It was surprisingly difficult. I thought making a collage was going to be a lot easier. I don't think I enjoyed it very much. If you have any suggestions to make collage making more enjoyable, leave it in the comments. What was great about the collage is that since I was gluing something onto the page, it covered up the bleed through of the alcohol markers here. I have a pretty limited amount of markers in regular skin tones, so I kind of run into the issue a lot of the time that I just have to use the same colors all of the time and it bothers me. So, you know, please. First, when I did this lady, I actually messed up the back of her head. The back of the head was shaped more like an alien from the movies. Luckily I went in and fixed that, so she got more proportional. On the left there, I needed to cover up the bleed through, obviously, and then I was like, okay, I'll just paint over it with some paint and then I'll figure something out later. And then I just didn't. So it's just streaky green paint. But on the right, there's a 3-eyed cat, and I do quite like it. And I think it would be interesting to try to make it into a stamp. The shapes are very easy, so it should not be that difficult. I find the process of blending colored pencils very fun and very therapeutic. It's especially nice when you're doing it in like simple shapes. If you're doing the circles, I could do that for like hours, probably, just working from like darker to lighter colors in circles. I really love doing portraits,
And I didn't do as many in this sketchbook as I could have. I think I wanted this sketchbook to be a place where I didn't necessarily need to do things that I thought was safe. Doing portraits is usually very safe for me. It is my comfort zone. I really love doing it. And I could have filled the entire sketchbook with just portraits because, you know, the challenge was to fill the sketchbook. I didn't really specify what I needed to fill it with. Similar to the way I felt about blending colored pencils, I realized that drawing bubbles, especially with alcohol markers, was very therapeutic and fun. And I realized that I didn't really have to look realistic in any way, shape or form. Drawing bubbles is very, like, you can just layer. Like, if you have, 5 different colors, just layer them. I also tried doing it with color pencils on the right, which was fun, but not in the same way. It wasn't as fun doing bubbles with color pencils as it was to do it with alcohol markers. This is my 5-year-old Annette coming out to play. I remember doing things like this when I was in kindergarten, where you'd have a regular piece of paper and then you'd fold it in half and just paint on one side of it and then mush it together to get, you know, a butterfly. Once again, you can see that because I used acrylic paint, it started sticking together because it is plastic. You know, this is a Picasso. It's not going in any gallery, so I'm not too pressed about it. I also really, really think the little veins that you get on the paint, it looks like the veins you'd get on a leaf. I did another portrait, and then on the, on the right, I know we've all had the face where we draw a bunch of eyes. I think I could have done the eye much more service if I had a different array of markers. It's kind of boring and desaturated, and the eyelashes are an absolute nightmare. Every time I draw an eye, most of it is just, it's fine, and then I get to the eyelashes and it's so stupidly ugly every time, and I don't understand what's wrong. Eyelashes are stupid and I don't like them. And then we have more bubbles in alcohol markers, and I even made some little judgments of them. So I've deemed this one as ugly, and then I realized that the dark green in the middle there was too harsh. It didn't blend well enough with the other colors because they were very light. A little positive ending there. The bottom right corner. The top of the carrot, I'm pretty sure this is, yeah, I messed up over here. That's my bad. Sorry. I realized it as I was coloring it. I was like, oh no, I've miscalculated. I think it could have been a lot more interesting, maybe if the squares were bigger and I had more like details, or if I picked maybe a subject that was more interesting than a fucking carrot. I don't know if I can like describe the feeling I had when I was doing this. It felt like I had found the meaning of life. I was like, oh my god, I'm having fun. And I say that in like the most kind to myself way. I'm like, oh my god, this is fun. Because sometimes doing art can be very scary because I feel like everything I create has to be good in case someone sees it, and it feels like a reflection of me as a person. So if I make something that doesn't look good, I feel like, oh my god, I might as well just like roll up in a ball and die. I was having so much fun that, you know, the perspective is off and the colors can be interesting, and it's, you know, it's not artistically highbrow, but I was having so much fun that it didn't even matter. And then at this point I hit the jackpot. I realized that I have found my new mission in life, which is drawing living rooms that I find on Pinterest with Tombow markers. This is just a regular red fine liner. I find it interesting to challenge myself to only use one size liner to, you know, do a drawing. You get a much more graphic approach by doing that, you know, limiting yourself to one weight. I obviously work with a very thin liner and I could have gone a lot bigger. I have a tendency to work with very, very thin lines and then later regret it and wish that I would have gone in with a much thicker one. It's not, it's not revolutionary, it's just filling the pages. But because I had so much fun with the last room, I genuinely could not stop thinking about the feeling I had when I was drawing that room. So I had to do it again. That is one of the things that I really, really enjoy about this challenge, was the fact that I realized something. If anything, at least I got out of this challenge a way and a technique that I love so much. Now, every time I do this now, every time I draw a room with my Tombow markers, I get this feeling of just unadulterated joy. You can see the slight bleed through because I used a fixative on the next pages, and when you use fixative on watercolor, it gets wet and it bleeds through the paper to the other side. And I know that. I could have covered up the painting on the other side so that it didn't bleed through, but I didn't. This is done with fine liners. Drawing buildings is always an interesting challenge. It is a very unorganic form. So, one wonky line and it is very noticeable. And this house is obviously full of wonky lines and wrong perspectives. I'm not going to get hired to do building illustrations if this is what I deliver as my greatest work. And on the right, I went the complete opposite way and drew leaves. You'll have to do something really, really bad to mess up a leaf. This is my cheap ass watercolor. I've gotten to the point where I am thinking of investing in actual proper watercolor, because if I use a kid's watercolor palette that is, it fits in the palm of my hand. It's a tiny, tiny little watercolor palette that is meant for children. And I really enjoy using it. It takes a lot of pressure off. And you can tell that it's obviously very cheap watercolor if you look at, the graining that is happening over here. You can also tell that I messed up a bit because it's a slightly off. Her proportions are just a teeny tiny bit off. But I enjoyed it nonetheless. That was what's important. And I will continue to use my cheap watercolor for as long as I can. These are actual Bristol paper that I drew on with markers. I love the feeling of drawing on very, very smooth paper. I mean, the crane on the right is biblically accurate. Once again, just kind of like the house. I'm not going to get hired to do any wildlife illustrations based on that crane. This is a question. Is this chartreuse? Is this a chartreuse color? Could we call that a chartreuse? Chartreuse. I'd call that a chartreuse. I did this very blocky. Obviously, there was no hard attempts at any blending in this one. And I've actually drawn this portrait once before. Her eyes. It's the more I look at it, it's wonky. It's wonky, but it did fill a page, which, to be honest, was the main goal of this sketchbook. So it did what it had to do. And then on the right, I did a little hand study. It's not great, but it's not terrible. The hand is covered in smudges of acrylic paint from the next spread, which is where I kind of took the technique that I did with the butterfly. I wanted to see if I could do it in a different way. I found a reference picture with pretty strong differences in shapes and colors, and I tried to work in a method where I work from the background to the foreground. So I did one layer of blue, and then I did the skin and the t-shirt and the hair separately. It would be interesting to see if I took the time and maybe worked at a larger scale to see if I could do a proper painting with details, or if I could, work with making the base layer and then going over it afterwards to add the details later. Before I went into the challenge, I thought to myself that I was probably going to do a lot more studies than I ended up doing. And I decided to do some studies of ears. It's not that I necessarily feel like I don't grasp how ears look. I don't really struggle with drawing them. I don't think I've ever like properly sat down and tried to figure out how they are, you know, put together either. I thought it would be a lot more interesting if I did drawings of ears with pretty intricate designs when it comes to jewelry. I feel like I'm not the only person who just like, if I have to draw a tree, I kind of go into like a toddler mode. I'm like, oh my god, why? Why? The thing is, trees aren't inherently like difficult to draw. I think a lot of the time, a lot of people, including myself, overcomplicate the way trees look. Because if you have like a vague shape and then a trunk, most people are going to be like, oh, that's a tree. So that's what I did here. I did some vague shapes with pink marker, and then I just added details with a red fine liner. And to be quite honest, it looks like trees. And then I tried to do some botanical drawings with just a black fine liner. I think what really helped the trees, because I don't think these look as good as the trees. I do prefer the trees by a long shot. When I'm only working with a fine liner, getting shading can be very difficult. So, you know, when I was working with the trees, I had the different values of the pink and the red, and I had the contrast of that. Here, I was only working with fine liners and black. It's not as good. I think maybe if I would have done this as well in the pink and red combo, it would have turned out a lot better. I enjoyed the way that I did the ear studies so much that I decided to do some studies of noses as well. As you can tell, I did realize that this page was very, very empty, and I tried to fill it as best as I could with an abundance of stickers. The noses look fine. They look like noses. A sad setup, however, to like look at the layout of the page. I think that really bothers me with this page, is like the noses look fine. It just looks kind of half done. And if I'm going to be completely honest with you, I don't know if I like actually studied the noses as well as I probably should have. I think I kind of did the regular where I just drew noses from reference and I just drew what I saw, and I may not have put as much thought into the way that the noses were built up as I probably should have. But fear not, because the Tombow markers are back. I don't know, the joy I get from just looking at these, worth everything. Also, I generally think this one little leaf in this turquoise color, smashing. This plant is a very fun plant. And if you have any questions about what colors I used for this drawing, I've provided you with a handy little reference swatch sheet on the right. This is DK from 17. Both of them are DK from 17. But the one on the right kind of looks more like DK's cousin from, you might have not met him as many times. You see him like every 3 years at the family reunion. Like they don't, this does not look like the same man, okay? I'm fully aware. As I was drawing it, I was like, this does not look like the same person. I don't necessarily think I did anything wrong, because the face he's pulling in the reference photo for the drawing on the right is just a face that is difficult to draw, because he's doing this thing where his chin looks very big because he's pulling his mouth up, and that threw me off because I wanted to make the chin smaller, but I was like, I can't do that because then I'm definitely messing up the proportions and like the anatomy. You know, if everything else fails, kids, just blame the reference photo. Okay, while we're at the topic of blaming I can't even blame the reference. It's a self-portrait done in acrylic paint. It's just bad. Like, why is my mouth... my mouth looks like it is trying to like leave my face. This was a slap in the face as a reminder that I'm very, very bad at painting portraits. I can draw portraits, but I can't paint them. Exhibit A, I can draw portraits, I can't paint them. These are drawings of Lino and Ian from Stray Kids. Do we pronounce it SKZoo or Skzoo? Also, just not important at all. Every time I see the SKZoo, I'm like, oh, a kazoo. You know, like the instrument. Ian doesn't. It's not the best. Lino looks like Lino. And I don't know how I managed to make him look like himself when the face is literally the size of my fingernail. Honestly, that is talent. Good job, Lo. I did some bathrooms. These aren't as fun or good as the other brooms. I think I got a bit too excited. I remember being like, I don't know what I'm doing with this perspective because it's not, that's not how a broom is built up. I think on the right, I wanted to see if I would get the same effect and joy from using just one marker. The answer is no. It would have been so much more fun and exciting, and I think I could have gotten away with the terrible perspective and wonky lines if I did it with the regular, mixture of colors. But when I just did the one dark red, it's questionable at best. These are borzois. The borzoi on the left looks like a dog. On the right, it looks like a slightly deflated balloon animal. Dog anatomy, not something I've put like a lot of time and effort in. I'll call this a win because it does look like a dog. It looks like a biblically accurate dog. These are done in ballpoint pen. I really, really love drawing illustrations of clothes with ballpoint pen because I very much enjoy the feeling of shading with a ballpoint pen and building up a color and value with a ballpoint pen. And you get to do a lot of that when you are drawing clothes. And then on the heads, I didn't feel like having to deal with the heads. So I just kind of figured, I'll cover it up with some glitter Posca markers, and that was fine. And I think that was the best choice because I don't think I would have enjoyed these drawings as much if I had to try to fit, a tiny little head on top of these. This fish on the left is one of my favorite pages in this entire sketchbook. And the thing is, I did this in acrylic paint. So why is it that I can somehow paint a fucking fish, but I can't do a face? The pink paint is also acrylic paint. However, if you look at it, it looks very chalky because it's a different brand. This pink paint is very chalky, and I don't know if it's something wrong with the paint. It's not fun to paint with. It's uncomfortable to paint with. A good way to make a sketchbook spread look a lot more cohesive is to just use the same colors on both pages. So I just did a simple stripe with the pink paint. Honestly, the best part of using that pink paint was when I was done using the pink paint. And because it's so chalky, I don't know if I need the little slip of paper in between the pages, but I just didn't want to take any chances, so I just used a little, piece of paper. And then I did my safe bet, which is always a portrait. This is Sun from ATs, and then on the right I did a illustration. It is in Posca marker and a thin fine liner. I really enjoy the way it looks. It is very much a very graphic drawing, which is not something I usually go for. You can probably tell by the dichotomy of the fact that, that the portrait on the left is a rendered portrait of a person, and then this girl doesn't even have a mouth. And it's a good way to fill a sketchbook because this took a lot less time than this. Once again, I just used Bristol paper to tape in because I didn't want to have to deal with the bleed through of the alcohol markers that I wanted to use. And then kind of in the same way that I randomly discovered my love for doing the rooms with the tomboy markers, I discovered my love for doing these random shapes and patterns with alcohol markers. There was no rhyme or reason. I just kind of drew different shapes and lines swirling around, and then I went in and filled the space with different types of markers, and it was very fun. Looking at this, I think, it could have been executed better. If I actually cared about that, I probably would have used the dark blue more. But overall, it was just, this wasn't trying to create a masterpiece. I was just having fun. Then I did some shoe studies, if you want to call it that. I was at my wit's end at this point for the like challenge part of this. You know, the orange heel at the bottom left looks fine. The sneaker is like missing parts of it. I don't think a functional human being could wear that shoe and like be comfortable. Shoes are so intricate sometimes, and I love and hate them at the same time. And then because I loved the other two so much, I just did another 2 spreads of the little patterns with alcohol markers. I really enjoy the way it looks like these pages are kind of connected. Like it looks like they flow into each other. They both flow from top right to bottom left. It's just so fun. Like I recommend you to just draw random shapes and then fill them in. You know, in the same way that the bubbles and the blending colored pencils, it is very therapeutic. We have reached the end and I went out with my classic portrait. It's wonky. I did this in bed, so like the perspective was very off. It's not a very good portrait. It was something that I kind of threw in, you know, I had to fill the book, okay? This was my final page. I just wanted to be done. And that, my friends, is the end. This was the entire sketchbook. Thank you so much for joining me. I will now send you back to regular low. So, regular low, take it away.
Welcome back to the percentage to actually view the entire video. Did you know that I can see you? I can see where you drop off. I can see where people skip to. I see everything, all right? The YouTube analytics are messing with my self-confidence. Thank you for joining me for this informal little sketchbook tour. It's a bit longer than my usual sketchbook tours, but when I asked in the community tab, did you know there's a community tab? You can vote there. Subscribe. Your opinion matters. It's almost election time. When I asked what your preferred length of a sketchbook tour is, the majority said the longer the better. So I am trying to please you, okay? It's always weird ending these videos. Bye!